we've talked a lot about the reporting, and I'm sure that a lot of people would like to hear the specifics about Nibiru and the reasons for and against. So we'll try and get onto that as well. So I went through the interviews that you did with Dr. Shimschuck and looked at some of his claims, and I'm just going to look at some of that. Okay. Now, he gives a detailed description in your part 1 interview with him. I'm just trying to get to that. Part 1. So this is from 20 minutes, 30 seconds into your interview with an astrophysicist, part 1. Now, just on Dr. Shimschuck, you touched on his credentials and that you'd seen his NASA credentials and so on. And I also asked, and where else? Of course, he supposedly graduated from MIT.
MIT, correct.
Now, I should just add it at this point as well that Derek Tube from The Way of the Pastor did a very good video, a couple of videos. He actually contacted MIT, sent them an email, and asked them if they had any record of Dr. Ronald Shimschuck graduating from MIT. And the reply came back from MIT that they had absolutely no record of Shimschuck. Do you have any comment on that, Michael?
Yeah, my comment is that in the event that I have changed his name or misspelled it, I will not say anything further on that matter.
Right, but I think we already established before at Dr. Shimschuck's insistence, after you called him Ron, that Shimschuck was in fact supposedly his name, correct?
I am not going to say if that is his name or not his name, Dazza.
Okay, well, what I would suggest is to any viewers listening, I would go to that interview. That would be the part 1 interview, wouldn't it, Michael?
That would be the part 1 interview, correct.
Listen to the part 1 interview on Michael's channel, and you will hear Michael calling Dr. Shimschuck Ron. And you'll hear Dr. Shimschuck, who responds as if he's quite offended and insists that he is Dr. Shimschuck. So I think it's fair to say, at his insistence, and that he graduated from MIT, that MIT should have a record of a Dr. Shimschuck. Is that a fair comment, Michael?
It's a fair comment, yes.
Okay. At 20 minutes, 30 seconds in the interview with Astrophysicist Part 1, you asked the question of Dr. Shimschuck, could you shed light on exactly what planet Nibiru is?
There may be some people listening, Dr. Shimschuck, who don't know what Nibiru is, or they might be confused. Could you shed light on exactly what planet Nibiru is?
You say Nibiru, and some people say Planet X. But this problem is more than a planet. We are talking about the solar system. At its center is a brown dwarf star, size approximately 13 Jupiter masses, or 2.5 to 10 to the 28 kilos, give or take. This brown dwarf has 7 orbiting planets, some as small as our moon, others larger than Earth. It's approximately 160 million miles in diameter and is in a 3,600-year elongated elliptical orbit relative to our southern hemisphere. Now the 6th outermost orbital we call Nibiru is the largest planet and the object that will be nearest to Earth, about 0.3 astronomical units. Surrounding the brown dwarf, which emits almost no visible light, the dense cloud of red iron oxide, dust. that most optics can't penetrate. That's why NASA used infrared to image the system. NASA believes this object will cross between Earth and Sun, and that's the worst possible scenario.
Thank you, Dr. Shimschuck.
Okay, so we've just heard the audio clip from your part 1 interview with Dr. Shimschuck. I'm just going to make some comments on the things that he said. So he's saying that what we're calling Nibiru, or what you say is Nibiru, some people is Planet X, is more than just a planet. We're talking about a solar system, correct?
I do not share all of his opinions, but I would agree with you. That is what he is saying on that recording. Yes.
Right. And he says that at its center is a brown dwarf star. So just to clarify the description of Nibiru Planet X, he is referring to that as being the whole system, but the whole system has at its center a brown dwarf star.
That would certainly seem to be his opinion based on everything he said about it. Absolutely.
He says that this brown dwarf star has a size of approximately 13 Jupiter masses. Now that's the mass, we're talking about mass, not the diameter. So 13 times the mass of Jupiter. As I recall, Jupiter has a mass of 316 times that of the Earth. He says this brown dwarf has 7 orbiting planets, some as small as our moon, others larger than Earth. It is approximately 160 million miles in diameter. Now, as he's rattling this off, a lot of these points will probably go unanalyzed because, you know, it takes time to break these things down and think about things. So 160 million miles in diameter, obviously he's not talking about the brown dwarf, because to give you a comparison, the sun, our sun, is 1.39, almost 1.4 million kilometers in diameter. I think that's about 850 million miles, if I remember correctly. I'm used to using kilometers. So 160 million miles in diameter would have to be the diameter of the Nibiru Planet X system, rather than any of the individual components. Would you agree with that, Michael?
I would agree. I would agree with your mathematics. Yes, sir.
Right. And he says it is at a 3,600 year elongated elliptical orbit relative to our southern hemisphere. I'm rather puzzled about that last comment, relative to our southern hemisphere, unless maybe he means that the elongated elliptical orbit is coming up from the southern hemisphere. Now that's interesting if he is, of course, because I live in New Zealand in the southern hemisphere, and I can see all the way below the ecliptic right down to the south pole of the ecliptic. There is nothing above the south pole that I cannot see from my sky looking south. So moving on, he says, now the 6th outermost orbital we call Nibiru is the largest planet and the object that would be nearest to Earth, about 0.3 astronomical units. Now that works out to 27.8 million miles. Surrounding the brown dwarf star, he said, surrounding the brown star dwarf, to use his words correctly, which was a very puzzling expression. Maybe he just got his words muddled. Surrounding the brown star dwarf, which emits almost no visible light, the dense cloud of red iron oxide dust that most optics can't penetrate. So let's break that down again. He's talking about the 6th outermost orbital that we call Nibiru is the largest and the object that would be nearest to the Earth at about 0.3 astronomical units, or 27.8 million miles. Now, I want to make some comments on that just to put things in perspective. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to share Starry Night over to share screen. So here is a view of our solar system. Let me present to everyone. Okay, you can see that, Michael? Right.
Yes.
So here is our view of our solar system out to Neptune. The brown circle there is Saturn. This grey one here is Uranus, and this blue one here is Neptune. The red one is Jupiter, and let's zoom in. And we've got the inner planets there out to Mars. The brown circle is Mars. The green one is the Earth. This one is Venus, and further in, and we haven't got the orbit turned on there. Let's turn that on, is the orbit of Mercury. Now, do you know what the distance is between the Sun and the Earth is on average, Michael?
I think approximately 93 million miles.
You would be exactly right. So 93 million miles. What is twice 93 million miles?
186.
186. So from the Earth across the solar system to the other side of our orbit would be 186 million miles. I'm doing this to give us some perspective of the distance. So going back to Dr. Shimschuck's comment, he claims that this system is approximately 160 million miles in diameter. So we're talking about 186 million miles across our orbit. To give you another comparison for something in between, the distance between Venus and the Sun, so out from the Sun to Venus, twice that distance would be 134.5 million miles. And the distance from the Sun out to Mars, that we're talking average distance, of course, would be 141.6 million miles. So the figure that he's given of 27, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong figure there, 160 million miles in diameter for the whole system is somewhere between the distance from the Sun to Mars and twice the distance from the Sun to the Earth. Is that fair comment?
Yeah, I can't disagree with your math. That certainly makes sense to me.
Right. I hope I've been clear on what I'm trying to say.
Clear. You're crystal clear. I'm following you perfectly.
So just to put it another way, that the whole solar system, the whole Nibiru Planet X solar system, would fit somewhere between the orbit of the Earth and Mars if we were to place the whole system there on the same plane as the planets. Is that clear?
That's clear.
Okay. So now he goes on to say that surrounding the brown dwarf star, or the brown star dwarf, as he says, which emits no visible light, the dense cloud of red iron oxide dust that most optics can't penetrate, he says. That's why NASA uses infrared to image the system. Well, I have a big problem with this, Michael, because as I mentioned earlier, brown dwarfs, there's nothing magical about brown dwarfs, okay? They reflect light just like any other planet would. If there was a brown dwarf within our solar system, it would reflect light just like Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune would. It would reflect light just like the moon does, and asteroids and comets. Anything that is solid in space will reflect light. In fact, even the moon is not really that very reflective. It actually has the reflectivity similar to that of bitumen or coal. So it's actually quite dark. But look at how bright it appears against the blackness of space.
Extremely bright.
Extremely bright. So the other problem that I've got, apart from the claim that Nibiru is somehow magically invisible to infrared light because of these big clouds of iron oxide dust blocking the light, making the light impenetrable to optical telescopes. The next problem that we have with that claim is that this huge cloud of iron oxide dust that he describes would not only block out Nibiru, Planet X, What else would it block out, Michael?
Well, from what you're saying, it sounds like we'd pretty much black out everything.
Yes, it would. It would block out everything in the vicinity of that system, which we've just described as having a diameter of the whole system that would fit somewhere between the orbit of Mars and the orbit of the Earth. So all of these stars that we can see in the background in my Starry Night simulation there, they would also be blocked out from view. Would that be a fair comment, Michael?
That would be a fair comment, but I would ask you to keep in mind, please, that these are his words and not my own that are coming across. I have never once made a claim to have any kind of scientific background and rely on information from others.
Right.
So if possible, I would be happy to try and set up a conversation between you and he.
Absolutely. I'd be keen to
talk
do
about it.
Mm-hmm.
But the bottom, yes, what you're telling me right now does make perfect sense to me, Dazza.
Right. Okay. Now, I appreciate that you're not an astronomer, Michael, and that these are not your words, but we are discussing what has been presented in your YouTube videos and on your websites. So that's what
right. I'm not absolving myself of all responsibility. No, I'm not.
So now, when we go out and look at the evening sky at this time of the year, at the moment, we can clearly see Jupiter and Saturn in the sky. And if we had these big red clouds of dust blocking out this big solar system coming through our solar system, then I would expect that there would be a lot of objects such as Jupiter and Venus and Mercury and Saturn and Mars and background stars and comets and things that we should otherwise expect to see that would suddenly become invisible. So there is a major problem for me with what Dr. Shimschuck is claiming in his statement. Now, to move on, he also says that the sixth outermost orbital, which we call Nibiru, and is the largest object, he says, and is the object that would be nearest the Earth about 0.3 astronomical units away, or that works out to 27.8 million miles. Now, the closest distance between the Earth and Venus, on average, is about 25 million miles. So again, that is just to give you some sort of perspective of the distance that we're talking about. We're talking about slightly further away than Venus at its closest distance, okay? So if Nibiru, which is supposedly the largest of the orbitals and much larger than the Earth, well, Venus is slightly smaller than the Earth. So I would expect that if the largest of the orbital that we call Nibiru and is going to be larger than the Earth at a distance of 27.8 million miles at its closest approach, it should be very, very visible in the sky. Michael, have you seen Venus in the sky?
Yes, I have seen Venus in the sky many times, Dazza.
Right. Can you describe to me what Venus looks like in the sky? Would you mind going back on camera, please?
Oh, hang on a second. It was getting hot. Yeah. Is it important that I have the camera on? I mean, everybody knows what I look like here.
I think it's quite good in as far as we can see your response. I think body language is very important.
All right, no problem. Let me just a second. Back on. Well, Venus is a very bright pinprick of light in the sky, and it's pretty much unmistakable from any other object out there.
Right. And also, a lot of people post videos claiming that Venus is Nibiru, don't they? Because
I've seen many people. Yes, yes.
Yep, they see this extremely bright object in the sky, and they start freaking out because they think that, you know, Venus shouldn't be that bright. We have this discussion every, what is it, every two years and 7 months, I think it is, when Venus comes around in the evening sky again, and people start freaking out each time saying, Venus shouldn't be that bright, it's Nibiru. And of course, it is in fact Venus. So my point being is that if Nibiru, the largest of the orbitals, was only 27 million miles away. It would only be slightly further away than Venus, and Venus is smaller than the Earth, and Nibiru is supposed to be bigger than the Earth, so it would be clearly visible in the sky. And yes, it would be reflecting visible light, because there's nothing magical about a brown dwarf that prevents that from happening. Okay, now moving on to the part 2 interview. You asked Dr. Shimschuck for a detailed description, and let me see if I can play that one for you again.
Okay.
So let me know if there's any problem with the audio.
Another question that maybe you might be able to answer. During your time with NASA, do you know if the space agency was able to determine Nibiru's composition?
Is that coming through okay, Michael?
Yes, sir. I hear it loud and clear.
Thank you.
NASA believes Nibiru, and I'm talking about the 6th outermost orbital. It has a central metallic core, mostly iron, with a silicate mantle, much like Earth, but with very important differences. Earth mass is, I think, 5.9 to the 10 to the 24. The radius 6,400. Nibiru's radius is 26,000. So 4 times the Earth. Mass is 12 times Earth. Big thing, you know?
That is frightening that Nibiru is 4 times the size of the Earth, yet the mass of the planetary object is actually 12 times Earth's mass. That is a frightening thought to comprehend.
Right, so there we have a clarification from Dr. Shimschuck about the size of Nibiru, or what we call Nibiru, which he refers to as the 6th outermost orbital. He says that Nibiru's radius is 26,000. Now, he doesn't actually state whether he's talking about miles or kilometers.
Yeah, right.
Do you know if he's talking about miles or kilometers, Michael?
Yes, I do not.
Okay. Well, we can actually confirm that he's talking about kilometers, because he does go on to say,
okay,
comparing it to the Earth, he says, what is it? He talks about 64, and then he says 6,000. Here it is. I'll just play that short bit again.
The radius 6,400.
Okay, so there he's talking about the radius of the Earth. Now, in kilometers, that radius is actually pretty close to the correct figure. The diameter of the Earth is 12,756 kilometers, so a radius of 6,400 is not far off there. So I think we can safely assume that he is in fact talking about kilometers. So he's talking about a radius of 26,000 kilometers, 4 times that of the Earth. So going back to what I was saying just before about if Nibiru was only 0.3 AU away from the Earth at its closest approach, that's 27 million miles, then if it was 4 times the size of the Earth, it would be enormously bright in the sky. Again, consider what Venus looks like. Venus is slightly smaller than the Earth. Even at 25 million miles, Venus is incredibly bright in the sky. So I think it's fair to say that these people claiming that Nibiru is in the sky and we can see it on webcams, and you can take photos of it with your iPhone camera and all that sort of thing, is nonsense. Would you agree with that, Michael?
Yes, I would agree with you, and this is one reason that I usually do not even look at photographs or try and interpret or present any sort of visual evidence whatsoever, because that is just not my impetus. So Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. The notion of capturing with a cell phone, to me, is assuming that it is there is absurd.
Right. Now, there's some other questions that you asked Dr. Shimschuck that I'm just trying to pull up here. You asked some questions about photos that people have taken showing Nibiru next to the sun.
Right, which, and he, if I remember, okay, go ahead, sorry.
Yep, and what was his response?
Oh, I believe in the interview he dismissed them as rubbish.
Right, he did. Okay. I'm just trying to find the soundbite for that. Just bear with me. I'll try and play that. Just while I'm looking for that, would you like to comment on what Dr. Shimschuck said about life on Nibiru, particularly the Anunnaki?
From my recollection, and forgive me, I have not listened to the interview in a while, but he laughed it off as the most preposterous thing he ever heard in his life, more or less. Yes,
he did. And he actually became quite frustrated about the sort of questions and
yes.
Yeah.
He said they were stupid.
Yep. Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to find this sound. Oh, here we go. I found it.
Thank you, Dr. Shimschuck. I touched on this last time, and you kind of brushed the question off, but I would like to bring it up again. I am by no means an image analysis expert. In fact, I state whenever somebody wants me to look at photographs of Nibiru, but I have seen some images that are compelling and have not been satisfactorily debunked. Images with a large orb behind the sun, often at the 5 or 8 o'clock position, do show up from time to time. Do you have any explanation for the frequency of these images and what they might be?
I've seen some photos you send me, lens flares, illusions, optical illusions, atmospheric anomalies, headlights, street lights, reflection. Not Nibiru. This is a stupid question. I answered this and no more.
Okay, so you're pretty much discounting and saying that photographs that are showing up are absolutely not of Nibiru. I understand. Thank you.
Well, that's very interesting, straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. If we give Dr. Shimschuck the benefit of the doubt and assume that he is in fact an astrophysicist, which I obviously have very serious doubts about, given that nobody can find any record of him in Google search except with reference to the Nibiru hoax, and the fact that the things that he is claiming in his statements about this Nibiru system just don't add up as far as astrophysics are concerned, which seems to be a serious contradiction. It's funny to hear straight from the horse's mouth that even the supposed Dr. Shimschuck, astrophysicist, is discounting all images of Nibiru next to the sun. What are your thoughts on that, Michael?
Well, I share his thoughts on that, and I don't agree with everything he says, but I too find it very difficult to believe that you can point a cell phone or your DSLR at the sky and image Nibiru, and I believe that assuming that Nibiru is out there, that you need a very good telescope to see it.
Right. Okay, so now we're probably approaching the 2-hour mark, and there's a lot more information that we could probably discuss, and maybe you'd like to come back for another discussion, I don't know. But I don't... Thank you, Michael. I don't want to go too long because, you know, I want people to watch the hangout. If I'm confronted with a long hangout, you know, I struggle to watch it too.
Nobody wants to watch 3 hours of video. I agree with you.
Right. So I might even break this video down into parts. But anyway, before we wind things up, I think it would be interesting to hear what Dr. Shimschuck has to say about the arrival of Nibiru. let's just pick up with what you said in your second part interview. And can you just clarify, when did you last interview Dr. Shimschuck?
It would be, I'd have to go back and look at the YouTube upload date, but it was, last time I spoke with him was the day prior to uploading that video.
And that was when?
Let me take a look.
Approximately, was it this year?
It was this year, yes.
Right, I think it was about April, if I remember correctly.
The date. April 22nd was the day that I uploaded the video, so it was either the day before, within 2 days of uploading that video was when I last spoke with him.
Right, so we're talking about April 2017 is when
Correct.
this second interview was filmed. Okay, so let's hear your question about just some discrepancies in what he said.
Last week, you hinted it would not happen until 2047, perhaps, or later. Can you account for this discrepancy, Dr. Shimschuck?
Let me just see. Okay, sorry, I need to back up a little bit there. Let me try this.
You specifically stated that Nibiru would be arriving sometime late in 2017.
Okay, so just to clarify, that was from the earlier interview. Can you confirm that, Michael?
This is information that I heard from him last year, last May. So not a month ago, but the May prior.
Right, so in May 2016, he said
Correct.
that Nibiru would be arriving late in 2017.
Yes.
Okay, so let's carry on. And then we heard the soundbite again. I'll just play that again.
Last week, you hinted it would not happen until 2047, perhaps, or later. Can you account for this discrepancy, Dr. Shimschuck?
Look, it's getting complicated. My old friend in NASA, Jim, let's call him Jim X, he was in the NRTT at NASA. So Jim retires, and he gets in touch with me about 5 years ago. And he shares with me some data he had. And it's Nibiru arrival September 17, and clear visibility, okay? Note that, clear visibility by January 12th, 2017. So now you go out and look at the sky, look for Nibiru. You see it? No. You go out at night, you see it? No. That means that the data were wrong, and the whole thing has to be revised.
So no Nibiru.
Wrong. What? Is this a cult and we suddenly switch from Jesus to atheism? Are we like a Jesus cult? They announce Jesus coming back in 2012. Oh, he don't? Okay, no problem. Change the plans. Okay, Jesus coming in 15. Oh, he don't show up? No problem. Jesus now coming in July 4, 17. For sure this time, okay? No, that's nonsense. We are not a cult. Nibiru didn't show up. So we must go back and double check all data to find the source of error. What's wrong? What did we do wrong? What did they do wrong? So Jim and I went all over the calculations, and we saw a little error, and we corrected, and that gives us 2055. 55, okay? This Nibiru will not be here until you probably and me and myself for sure are long dead.
So I guess that's quite a relief for everybody to hear, Michael.
Yeah.
Now, he raises an interesting point. First of all, he made it very clear that according to the data, that Nibiru would be very clear and visible by January 12, 2017. Correct?
He did state that, yes, sir.
He did state that. Now, I certainly haven't seen Nibiru very clear in my sky, and we're now into July. So he said that obviously it wasn't there, it didn't turn up, so obviously they made a mistake. They had to go back and check the data, checked the calculations, and they found that there was a little error. So they redid their calculations, and now they're looking at an arrival date of 2055. I have to say, I can just imagine old Scotty with his new Nibiru channel, if he's still alive, then called Nibiru Planet X 2055. Sorry, Scott, I just had to say that. But this brings in an interesting point, is that if they had to recalculate the data, they've obviously got data that they're working from, and they've come up with this new arrival date of 2055, which means that they're taking observations. And if they're taking observations, they know where Nibiru, Planet X, the system is right now. Now I'm going to go back to share screen, sharing Starry Night there. So for all of these objects that we can see in the sky, they all have a position in space. Okay? And I can select anything. For example, with reference to good old Igor, Catalina, which apparently is Nibiru, by the way. Catalina US 10 is apparently Nibiru, according to Igor. But we can find any one of these objects, and I might just need to turn on some labels here. So I need to go view, solar system. Okay, so I've got my comets and so on. And I've got to turn on the labels for comets. Okay, so here are all the comets, and let's just pick one of them. Center. Am I not seeing a label? Okay, so my point is that for any of these objects, here we go, I just needed to zoom in some. We've got all of the information there, position in the sky, and so on. So we've got right ascension and declination here. These are the coordinates for the object in the sky. To make calculations for the orbit and trajectory of any object, we need to know what its position is in the sky. So it's actually impossible for anybody to make any prediction about any object in space and say it's going to be here on the 12th of January 2017 or it's going to be here in 2055 unless we have actual observations of the object and we know its trajectory and we know its right ascension and declination coordinates. Which begs the next question. Why has Dr. Shimschuck not simply provided the world with the right ascension and declination coordinates for the Nibiru system? You have any thoughts on that?
I do not have an answer. That I do not have an answer to, sir.
Right. And this is the question that I and others, Astronomy Live and other amateur astronomers who are involved in debunking, always ask, if your Nibiru Planet X is real, what are the right ascension and declination coordinates? Because I can pull up the right ascension and declination coordinates for any known object in space. As you just saw, I just picked a comet and pulled up its right ascension and declination. That's the current right ascension and declination. I can also step this forward to 2055, and we're still centered on that same comet. We're stepping through the years here. Let's assume that was Nibiru, 2055, July the 1st. And there is the right ascension and declination coordinates for Catalina C 2007 M2, I think that is, for that date in 2055. So it's the old saying, show me the money. So for all of these Nibiru fearmongers and hoaxers that claim that they are showing photos of Nibiru Planet X, show me the money. Show me the right ascension and declination coordinates, or it doesn't exist. You think that's a fair comment, Michael?
I would agree with you that any object in the heavens should have the right ascension and declination in order to be identified. Yes, sir.
Right. Okay.
And I agree that it is difficult to comprehend and believe in something if you don't have those facts at hand.
Right.
And that is why I will say that I am not entirely sold one way or the other.
Okay. So we've been going for just on 2 hours now. So I think it would probably be a good time to maybe wind up the interview. Is there anything that you would like to add before we go, Michael?
No, I would just like to say that despite whatever's being, I haven't really paid much attention to the chat room, but I just want to say that you have been a perfect gentleman. And I have appreciated having the opportunity to speak with you this evening. And I would like to have continue our conversation again sometime soon. And if you are interested, I will see, and I don't know when I'll be able to get in touch with him again, but should I would certainly be happy to try and facilitate a conversation between you and Dr. Shimschuck.
Right. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. And if you're willing, and if Dr. Shimschuck is willing, I would like to bring in Astronomy Live if possible, because Astronomy Live is far more qualified than I as an astronomer. We're both amateur astronomers in that sense. We're not qualified. We don't have any formal qualification in astronomy, but we certainly have a knowledge of astronomy. I'm on the committee of my local astronomical society, and I've been an amateur astronomer for many years. But Astronomy Live has a fantastic knowledge of astronomy. He's able to do the calculations. He understands the orbital mechanics and so forth, and he would be far better qualified than I to discuss the technical aspects of the orbital elements of Nibiru Planet X with Dr. Shimschuck.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
in fact, I happen to have a lot of respect for Astronomy Live too, even though at one point in time there was a comment made on my website that was derogatory toward him, and it was unproven. And Astronomy Live, if you are listening to me now, I just want to say that I am very sorry for having made that comment at that time, and I hope that you can let that pass, and that I do feel very bad for the way that you have been treated by others out there.
thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. And just before I go too, I want to say that this whole Nibiru Planet X thing really started back in 1983 with the IRAS infrared all-sky survey, picking up some signal that they didn't know exactly what it was. And this is where the whole Nibiru Planet X thing really started off. And then, of course, it really gained ground in 2003 with Nancy Lieder claiming that Nibiru was going to be here in 2003. And unfortunately, she advised her followers euthanize their pets as she did to her 2 dogs. She killed her 2 dogs. I hate to think that too many people followed her lead and killed their pets as she did. So here we are from 2003, it's now 2017, so 14 years on, and we're still waiting. And amazingly, Nancy Lieder still has quite a following. But going back to the IRAS survey in 1983, it was new technology that they were using. As with any new technology, we make new discoveries. And yes, they did detect something, and yes, they didn't know exactly what it was at the time, but they subsequently identified what they were looking at as an ultra-luminous infrared galaxy, a ULIRG. And so they're looking at the infrared signal of a background galaxy. New technology, imaging in infrared, looking at things that we've never seen before because we didn't have the technology previously. It's no surprise that they would detect things that they hadn't seen before.
Right.
Including distant galaxies. And that's what it was. It was, in fact, a galaxy. It wasn't Planet X. They thought that maybe it could have been another planet, far out, far reaches of the solar system. But as it turned out, what was discovered in 1983 was, in fact, an ultra-luminous infrared galaxy, not Nibiru Planet X. And probably deserves some comment on Planet 9. As I've posted previously in my videos, absolutely Planet 9 may well exist. The researchers from Caltech, Brown and Battergen, have said themselves that at its closest approach, Planet 9 would come no closer than 200 AU to our Sun. To put that in perspective, Neptune is 30 AU from our Sun. So
very far.
very far. And also the orbital period of Planet 9, if it exists, they're talking somewhere in the region of 15,000 years, as I recall. 10 to 20,000 years, maybe 15,000 years. And Nibiru Planet X supposedly has an orbital period of 3,600 years. So just in closing, Michael, I'm just going to share my screen again. Can't see my screen.
I have a black screen right now.
I've got a black screen. Let me start that again. See if I can start it sharing again. Okay, it doesn't look like that's going to play ball for me. Oh, here we go. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
So I just wanted to say, after all that we've discussed, including the Donald Trump admits Nibiru as real science executive order, President Putin admits Nibiru is real, and all of the rest of it, I think it's fair to say that you acknowledged at the start of this interview, when we looked at a number of those stories, that you are going to have to go back and reassess a lot of the stories on your YouTube channel and someone'sbones.com website. Is that fair comment, Michael?
I said on some of them, yes.
Okay.
That certainly have not panned out. That certainly have not panned out in the direction the story indicated it would. Especially in regards to Trump admitting Nibiru, which of course he has not done yet, and maybe he won't, maybe he will, but yes.
Right. So the most popular uploads, Vatican warns Trump, do not talk about Nibiru. Trump admits Nibiru is real, signs executive order. Trump tweets about Nibiru. Basically, a lot of this seems to involve Trump and Putin and Russian politics and so on, which...
That is correct.
We keep seeing that on the website. Let me just pull up. Oh, and also that Dr. what was his name? Zakharovich. This image here, you confirm that that is in fact not Dr. Zakharovich?
Correct.
So you'll be looking at that story as well?
Yes.
Now, as we, a thing that we also see in a lot of your stories is that when we Google the name for all of these people involved in your stories, we seem to get the same thing happening time and time again, is that the only references to these people seem to come up to do with the Nibiru hoax and shared stories about the Nibiru hoax, rather than anything actually about the claimed person and his real life work. So supposedly this Diamond Damer Zakharovich is an astronomer, but there seems to be no record of him other than related to the Nibiru hoax. Can you explain that, Michael?
Yes, I'll say that it's possible that Diamond Damer Zakharovich is not the actual name of the individual.
Right, okay. Now, you talk on your website about this information being suppressed, public records being deleted, and all of that sort of thing, correct, Michael?
I'm sure I've made references to things in that direction, yes.
Right. Can you just explain to me before we go why you think it is that the powers that be, the government, the people lurking in the shadows, pulling the strings, are able to erase the public record of these astronomers and information that they've been sharing? Dr. Shimschuck apparently went missing for quite some time. Other astronomers had supposedly been murdered or had very suspicious deaths and so forth. Can you explain to me, Michael, why you think it is that you have gone untouched with your YouTube channel, Nibiru News, and your website, someone'sbones.com, actually publishing what should be totally classified and top secret information that astronomers have supposedly been murdered for? How does that work?
Well, I am certainly not the only person to have written or YouTubed or blogged about astronomers allegedly associated with Nibiru. meeting untimely demises. In fact, I'm sure there are dozens of other people that have talked about that long before I did. And a lot of times I'm citing information that others have put out before me. Now, as to why I am able to do this and go untouched, well, I think I had a very humorous way of putting my information out. And if they come after one person, they have to go after everybody. And there's a lot of people out there talking about Nibiru and its plausible deniability. I mean, they'd rather let us go ahead and broadcast this information.
Right.
And like I said,
Go ahead.
And like I said, I am not a diehard sworn believer in Nibiru. I am always weighing it on a scale, one side and the other, trying to balance it back and forth in my mind, listening to what's being said. And for the most part, I try not to listen very much to what the other YouTube channels are talking about, because I like to distance myself from them, because I feel that I'm putting out a different form of information than they are, in a way that maybe people can relate to and not be scared, and maybe see that there is a lot of other things out there that we need to worry about. And this is actually what Dr. Shimschuck said, is don't worry about Nibiru, worry about nuclear war, worry about climate collapse, worry about nuclear power plants melting down. Yeah. And I agree with that. Something's going to get us eventually, and it's likely going to be one of those things, and not Nibiru, that ends civilization as we know it.
I'd have to agree with that too. We've got bigger problems such as climate change at the moment, and that is certainly something that I do not deny. The climate is changing. It's got nothing at all to do with Nibiru Planet X or any brown dwarf passing through our solar system. But I think that climate change is undeniable, and it is something that we have to be aware of. And it's very hard to do anything about it individually, but individually we all do play a part. And I think that we need to bear that in mind, and even if we can, to put political pressure on our governments to, do what we can to try and control pollution and try and limit the effects that we're having on the atmosphere.
Absolutely.
So yes, just on that final point, that I do find it rather surprising that while there are claims that astronomers are being murdered for speaking out, there seems to be no problem with YouTube channels such as Nibiru Planet X, Nibiru News, Steve Olson, and all the rest of it, freely posting all of these videos and photos supposedly showing Nibiru Planet X, and all going untouched. Apparently,
there is a certain irony in it all, absolutely.
Yep. Apparently, the powers that be are not so powerful when it comes to YouTubers, which seems a bit strange to me. Michael, I want to thank you for being such a very good sport, and thank you for joining me. Thank you for putting the invite out there for a discussion. And I think it's fair to say that there's going to be a number of your diehard followers and viewers on your channel who are either going to be very pleasantly surprised at how I conducted this interview, or they're going to be, and I think this is more likely, they're going to be very upset that it didn't go the way that they were painting it to be.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. So many people are out there, Dazza, just, and I can't even tell you how many private emails I got from people telling me, don't do this, and I just don't understand it.
Right. And of course, you even had a message through YouTube from a fake Dazzathecameraman.
Which I knew it, once I saw the grammar and the spelling, I knew it wasn't you, Dazza.
You're right. Apparently, I don't know how to spell reschedule.
Exactly.
So thank you, Michael. I appreciate your time. And as you mentioned, if you can arrange an interview with Dr. Shimschuck, I would be very happy to follow up on that. There's a lot more. There's a lot more material that we could have covered in this hangout. Maybe we can follow up with another one.
I will do that, Dazza. And are we still live right now?
Yes, we are.
Okay. I just want to say that in closing, to anybody out there that of my listeners out there, this has been a great interview, and Dazza has been polite and respectful, and all of his questions were on point and viable questions. And I know there are a lot of questions that I cannot answer. I am always searching for answers. I am always looking for the bigger picture out there. And I hope all the listeners out there will do the same, whether or not that means Nibiru is real or Nibiru is not real. You have to look at the evidence, and the critical evidence too. So I encourage everybody to not only listen to people that are talking about Nibiru, but to also listen to yourself, Daz, listen to Astronomy Live, listen to Fact or Fiction, to get the complete picture so that you can actually form an opinion by hearing both sides of the story and not limiting yourself to one angle.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate that. And thank you to Sean Hufford for joining the Hangout to be the technical support. Thank you to all the people in the chat for your contributions. I'm sorry that I haven't been able to follow the chat during the discussion and respond. And thank you to Queen of Hooks as well, and others for the information that you've been able to pass on to me for use in this interview. I appreciate your input on that. Thank you. So this is Dazza the cameraman. Thank you for joining us, and we're going to end the broadcast now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me this evening, Dazza.